Hello, it's Jim Hutchens for the Jerusalem Connection Spot Report for this week. This coming Thursday is the Holocaust Memorial Day, Remembrance Day. It's called Yom HaShoah. It's the day when we remember the horrific attempt on the part of the Nazis to exterminate the Jewish people. It is a day of remembrance, but it's also a reminder that there are those in the world today who want to do exactly that, and they've committed themselves to it. Iran has committed themselves to the destruction of Israel and the Jewish people. The jihadists among the Hezbollah, the jihadists among the Palestinians, this is what they want to do. They're committed to that. Their charter documents call for the annihilation of the Jewish people and of Israel. And at the same time, there's an increased focus on Christians, the persecution, the elimination of Christians among the Muslim countries, especially Iran, once again, Iraq, Egypt, the Muslim countries of Nigeria and elsewhere. And interestingly enough, there is a focus on Christians who are known as Christian Zionists. And interestingly, the people against them are other Christians. Sadly, many among the evangelicals. It's an attempt to explain away the age-old heresy, actually, based upon the interpretation of Scripture principles by St. Augustine, where he allegorized and spiritualized eschatology, for example, and much of what was related to Israel, the covenants of God. It's replacement theology that some of these evangelicals are trying to advance. Now, they don't call it that, but that's what it is. Here's a word from Malcolm Hedding, who's with the International Christian Embassy in Jerusalem. He says this: a new form of replacement theology has arrived on the Christian scene called fulfillment theology. Like replacement theology, it ends up contending that since the time of Jesus, the Jews no longer enjoy a God-given national destiny in the land of Canaan. This time around, it's not the church that replaces Israel or takes over her promises in the Scripture, but in fact it is Jesus himself. He fulfills in his life and redemptive work all the promises that God ever made to the Jews, even the promise that Canaan would be the everlasting possession of the Jewish people. Jesus is the promised land. Now, they attempt to make a distinction between replacement theology and fulfillment theology, but it's a distinction without a difference. They're the same thing. They end up the same place. The Jews are deprived of the covenant promises that God made to them, especially with regard to the land. Dale Berge is on the faculty at Wheaton College, and I'm embarrassed to even share this, frankly. I'm a graduate of Wheaton. I served there as a chaplain, and this man would not have been on the faculty when I was there. These views would not be tolerated, but they are today, sadly. He said, "Who shall inherit the land? Not the physical descendants of Abraham, but those whom Jesus has called the meek." He goes on to say, the people of Israel cannot claim to be planted as vines in the land. They cannot be rooted in the vineyard unless they are first grafted into Jesus. That branches that attempt living in the land, the vineyard which refuses to attach to Jesus, will be cast out and burned. Cast out and burned. Isn't that the rhetoric of the incinerators? Yes, it is. Does Jesus have anything to say about this? Has the church, has he replaced all the promises that have been given, the covenant promises of God? Well, listen to what he says in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 17 and following. He says, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets, to abrogate, to annul, to do away with the law and the prophets. I did not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them." I'm going to ensure and I'm going to validate these promises and see that they are fulfilled. "For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen, will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished." He's going to accomplish everything. Not one promise, not one covenant that God has ever made with anybody will be annulled. But then he goes on to say something very sobering. He says, therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teach others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. I would suggest to you that there may be Christians who subscribe to replacement or fulfillment theology, whatever you want to call it, that are in heaven. But they will be the least in the kingdom of heaven. The very least. So until next week, Od Ki Yavo Shiloh, or until Messiah comes, Shalom Aleichem.